You're sitting in a crowded room, surrounded by laughter and chatter. Yet a cold, heavy sensation settles in your chest as you realize you've never felt more alone. You look at the faces around you, performing their roles, and a quiet, exhausting thought whispers, "I don't belong here." One of the strangest things about highly intelligent people is that they rarely announce their exit. There is no dramatic goodbye, no public explanation, and no final argument. One day they are everywhere, and the next, they are simply gone. They stop posting, they reply less, and they politely decline invitations to gatherings they never would have missed before. People quickly label them as antisocial, depressed, or arrogant, assuming they believe they are better than everyone else. But psychology reveals a much deeper, more unsettling truth. They do not disappear because they hate humanity, but because they have started seeing the invisible architecture of human behavior. If you have ever felt the overwhelming urge to quietly pull away from the noise of the world, this video is a map of your own mind, explaining why your sudden disappearance is not a sign of failure, but a rational act of self-preservation. Chapter 1. The Evolutionary Mismatch, the Savanna Theory. To understand why intelligent minds withdraw, we have to look past modern lifestyle advice and travel back to the ancient African savanna. In 2016, psychologists Satoshi Kanazawa and Norman Lai proposed a radical framework called the Savanna Theory of Happiness. They argued that the human brain is still biologically adapted to the ancestral environment of the Pleistocene epoch, where our ancestors lived in small hunter-gatherer bands of about 150 individuals. In those tight-knit groups, having frequent contact with friends and allies was a strict requirement for basic survival. But Kanazawa and Lai discovered a startling paradox when they analyzed data from over 15,000 individuals. While frequent socialization with friends significantly increases life satisfaction for the average person, more intelligent individuals actually experience lower life satisfaction when they socialize more frequently. Why does this happen? The researchers suggest that general intelligence originally evolved as an adaptive mechanism to solve evolutionarily novel problems. Extremely intelligent minds are much better equipped to navigate the modern, complex world without relying constantly on a small local tribe. For them, frequent social rituals do not provide emotional nourishment. Instead, they act as an evolutionary distraction from more meaningful pursuits. When an intelligent person disappears, they are not acting out of malice. They are simply experiencing a biological truth. Their limited mental energy is better spent building their own future rather than maintaining reciprocal alliances that are no longer necessary for their day-to-day survival. Chapter 2. The searing weight of hyper-awareness. But the evolutionary mismatch is only the first door. Once you step through it, you encounter the exhausting psychological reality of hyper-awareness. For most people, a conversation is just a conversation. But for a highly perceptive person, the brain operates as an ultra-fine, high-speed data filter. They don't just hear words. Their minds automatically perform what psychologists call thin slicing, capturing the silent, nonverbal channel of human interaction. They instantly notice a slightly avoided glance, a forced smile, a 3-second hesitation before a compliment, or a sentence that is normal on the outside but full of hidden, fake energy. This sharp pattern recognition is incredibly isolating. Once your brain begins to connect these behaviors, it becomes impossible to unsee them. You start realizing that your friend only reaches out when they need an emotional anchor. You catch the quick flash of envy in a coworker's eyes when you succeed. You see the boss who raises his voice and realize he is really just a terrified child afraid of losing control. This continuous data stream overactivates the brain's default mode network DMN, the system responsible for self-reflection and predicting social futures. While others are simply enjoying the moment, the overly aware mind is running a silent, non-stop marathon of social analysis. This incurs a massive neurological cost. Cognitive research shows that individuals with greater cognitive complexity expend vastly more physical and mental energy during routine social situations. This results in a deep, cellular depletion that psychologists call translation exhaustion. They are forced to spend hours translating their complex, multidimensional thoughts into simple, predictable social scripts just to keep the people around them comfortable. Eventually, the noise tax becomes too expensive to pay. They realize they are being emptied by their interactions rather than filled, and they choose the quiet sanctuary of distance. Chapter 3. Carl Jung and the Threat of the Authentic Mind. The legendary psychoanalyst Carl Jung wrote extensively about the toll this takes on the human spirit. He warned that most people spend their entire lives in complete identification with the collective unconscious, wearing a socially programmed mask he called the persona. The persona is the version of yourself you present to the world to ensure acceptance and avoid rejection. But for highly intelligent individuals, the gap between their authentic self and their social mask is not a gap. It is a chasm. Every single day, they are forced to perform normalcy. They must hide their deepest questions, pretend they do not see systemic flaws, and nod along with tribal talking points just to avoid being labeled as too critical or negative. This performance is psychological torture. Jung argued that real mental health requires individuation, the process of shedding these collective masks to become your true, authentic self. But when you choose to individuate, society doesn't applaud. It reacts defensively. Neuroscience research explains why. When a person encounters someone who is intellectually superior, their amygdala, the brain's primitive threat center, lights up as if they were in physical danger. Your intelligence unconsciously triggers their shadow. They project their own insecurities, lazy thinking, and unhealed wounds onto you, labeling you as arrogant or pretentious simply because your natural level of existence reflects their limitations. Tired of managing other people's psychological defenses and exhausted by shadow projection, the intelligent person quietly steps out of the theater. They choose to build their own stone tower, much like Jung did in Bollingen, to protect the fragile, sacred space of their authentic development. Chapter 4. Schopenhauer's Choice: Solitude or Vulgarity. Centuries ago, the German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer arrived at the same brutal conclusion about the social cost of intellect. He observed that a high degree of intellect naturally makes a person unsocial. Schopenhauer believed that the more a person has within themselves, the less they require from the external world. A mind rich with ideas, imagination, and deep inner dialogue does not crave constant, superficial stimulation. To Schopenhauer, the noble individual eventually realizes that society offers only two real options: solitude on one side or vulgarity on the other. The average person clings to noisy distractions and trivial gossip because silence forces them to confront their own internal emptiness. The intelligent person, however, does not fear silence. They fear meaninglessness disguised as noise. They decline invitations because they refuse to pay emotional rent on relationships that feel entirely hollow. They recognize that a conversation is not a real connection if it is merely a performance executed by people reading from generic social scripts. When they withdraw, nothing is actually lost. Solitude becomes their true home, a serene space where the pain of constant social friction cannot reach them. They do not run away out of arrogance. They step back because their intellectual life has become their true life, and everything else is simply unnecessary noise. Finding yourself in the silence. Intelligent people rarely disappear overnight. They disappear one quiet realization at a time, one boundary at a time, one moment of choosing themselves over the performance of availability. One day, they simply stop arguing with people who have already decided not to understand them. Another day, they quietly walk away from friendships that only survive when they are acting as the unpaid, exhausted therapist. They stop looking for validation in the applause of the crowd because they have learned a deeper truth. Real confidence is built from self-respect, not the cheap dopamine of approval. If you have found yourself stepping back from your social circles, do not ask yourself if you are losing your mind or becoming antisocial. Ask yourself a far more important question. Are you running away from people, or are you finally walking toward the life that was always meant for you? Your rarity, your depth of awareness, and your quiet intensity were never your weaknesses. They are your greatest strengths. It is time to stop playing small to make others comfortable. Build your own tower, cherish your solitude, and let your mind finally find the peace it needs to create something extraordinary.